All right, welcome back to Recharge. I'm Dr. Ryan Smith, and today we have the definitive guide to overhead pressing, something that lots of people develop issues with or have had issues with in the past. And we're going to address that from our mobility to the technique of standard pressing, all the way to an alternatives for pressing in case you have pain or limitations or anything along those lines. So let's start with the mobility and limitations for the overhead press. So first and foremost, to check your mobility of, can I actually go overhead? Now, typically when we're overhead, right, we need to have a solid amount of shoulder mobility and upper back mobility. So the easiest way to check that is first and foremost find an empty wall and a PVC pipe or a stick or whatever you happen to need. You're going to sit as flush to the wall as possible. So I'm going down all the way. There should be no gap between the wall and my back. From here, I'm going to take the PVC pipe and grab it so my hands are out where I would typically press. Head against the wall, I go up, and I see my limitations or not. If I only get to here, that might mean I might have some mobility limitations for overhead. Now, with the grip overhand like this, it's usually a shoulder joint or upper thoracic mobility, so joint limitations. But if we do an underhand check as well, this is really looking at the muscle flexibility, specifically of the lats. So I do the same thing. I keep my back flat, I drive overhead, and I see, can I get to the wall behind me? If I have gapping of my back, or I can't reach the wall, those are cautionary tales to say, hey, let's slow down before we go overhead with lots of weight or lots of reps. And here I'm going to explain why with the technique of the strict and the push press. So let's say I only got to here with that test on the wall for either direction, right? The good news is our body's always going to prioritize putting weight overhead and not let it fall on us. So if I'm pushing something overhead and I only have this much shoulder flexion, where else does that motion come from but my back or my rib cage? So it may end up looking like this. When my head's really jutted forward and I'm really arching at my back, flaring my rib cage, this is often where lots of people get into when they don't have that shoulder or upper back mobility. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's something that can be worked on to make this more comfortable, right? But if you do have the requisite mobility, let's talk a little bit of technique as far as that goes. So if you're doing a barbell strict press or a push press, which is the typical in any gym, right? A strict press will start from a solid front rack position, right? So my elbows are up high. From here, I'm pulling my neck out of the way by doing a double chin, and I'm pressing it straight overhead, shaving the hairs on my chin, and holding out and locking out over top. You'll notice my back isn't arched, I'm keeping my rib cage down, and I'm reaching for the ceiling and creating a nice shelf with my wrists, right? And then I'm going back down the same way, pulling my neck back, coming straight down, into a solid front rack position. Now the push press allows us to do more volume and use our hips to help the weight get overhead. When you're doing the push press, it should feel lighter, in quotes, to get it up overhead. So for that, the only change is I dip my knees straight down, and from here, I'm jumping up through my hips to allow that to help me drive the barbell up. So I dip, drive, and I'm finishing the same position, creating that shelf with my wrists overhead. So that's the barbell strict technique. But let's say you had mobility limitations, or have some pain or other things that are going on with your shoulders, and doing overhead pressing like that is painful. Well, here's a bunch of alternatives and great rehab ways to get your shoulders back in their prime form. All right, so you're lacking some mobility and you just can't get to that wall quite yet. Or maybe you have a history of pain, like often people say an arrow shooting through the front of my shoulder, like right there, or awkward clicking sensations as accompanied with pain. Any of those reasons are not a deterring factor for you to not go overhead. If anything, you should be doing more overhead type pressing in ways that feel good. So here's a couple options for you. So number one, and our favorite that we think everybody should do more consistently, it's called the landmine press. It's called the landmine because one end of the barbell is in the ground and the other is in your hand. Commonly, gyms will have a soft air you can put it in or an actual landmine thing in a rig that you can use. From there, what you're going to do is one leg will be forward, opposite of the hand that's grabbing the barbell, so my right forward versus my left hand up here grabbing the barbell. I'm going to be slightly bent over, And from here, I'm going to press up, making a small C. So it's not a straight line, it's a small C or crescent moon shape going up. So from here, I go up, small C. And as I get to the top, I'm reaching out in front of me, keeping my body square out in front of me. Come back down straight. Same thing, small C. Reach and pause. So the landmine press allows us to press overhead in a great range of motion, allows us to really reach and push from our pit. More often than not, it's a pain-free motion for most people and feels really, really good at how to really press with our upper back and the muscles around our armpit, like our lats and our serratus along those lines. So that's option number one. The second concept is to involve a bottoms-up press. Now, here's a little analogy for you. If your shoulder and your body is this really well-oiled machine, it's a car vehicle, what you can press overhead would be something like this. A straight kettlebell press overhead is how much power that I have in the car or the vehicle that is myself. The kicker is I can only go straight if I only practice this. How I work on my steering, or the little things and the finesse of that shoulder health and strength, have to do with the bottoms up press. So this is the alternative for you. If I can do this and really steady this weight, keeping my rib cage down and press fully overhead, this is the steering wheel of that analogy. And my shoulder feels pretty darn good in this position, although it's really, really hard. So you'll see that's why I'm using the lighter weight compared to the heavier kettlebell. So if you can get good at developing power with a kettlebell like this and increase your overall strength, and accompany it with some bottoms-up kettlebell work, you'll find that you're able to control the weight and feel generally more conducive to getting overhead in those shoulders over the long period of time. So if you're missing the mobility or you have pain, you have the landmine press, you have bottoms-up kettlebell work. If you have the mobility, focus on strict barbell pressing or push pressing in combination with any of these as accessory work. This is a definitive guide to the overhead press here from Recharge. If you want to check us out at YouTube or our Facebook channel, it's rechargexfit.com, through our website as well. Thanks, catch you next time.